John Harbaugh got real and had some words for the Zach Orr hate that's been going on throughout the course of the season. Plus, there are new narratives being formed around Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. All that and more coming up on a bonus edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day a week plus more daily Ravens podcast. So news, analysis, updates, we have you covered there. And you can tell a friend, tell a family member that we have them covered as well over here on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Stress-free Sunday here. It feels so good here right before the new year. And obviously, once that new year turns and that page turns, it's go time for this Baltimore Ravens team. Hopefully, they can wrap up the division against Cleveland in Week 18. And then from there, the playoffs begin. We'll be talking about the playoff picture a little bit as it becomes more and more updated with each passing game. The Broncos and Bengals had the worst best or the best worst game I've ever seen, or one that's going to go down on the history books for a lot of different reasons. We'll talk about who the Ravens could play and why it's increasingly likely they're going to get one team in the postseason. Then we're going to dive into a bunch of stuff over the course of the first and second segments of the show. First of all, John Harbaugh, he got real and he had some words for Zach Orr and the hate that's been going on with Zach Orr and just how he's done this season as a whole. And almost kind of like an I told you so moment for John Harbaugh based off his comments. And in the second part of the show, we'll dive into some new narratives that have been forming around Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens pertaining to expectations. And of course, everybody's favorite topic, the MVP conversation. So let's dive into it here. Let's start off with John Harbaugh's comments about Zach Orr. And look, the turnaround that Zach Orr and this defense has had ever since that second Cincinnati game on Thursday Night Football has been absolutely unreal. Like, can't say enough about it. And just for some context, we'll take a look at the Ravens' first 10 games versus their last 6 over the last month and a half for Baltimore. First 10 games, Baltimore has given up 25.3 points per game to their opponents. Last 6 games dropped that number by 9 to 16.3. Total yards per game, 367.9 to 267. Opponent yards per play, 5.7 to 4.4. Opponent passing yards per game, 294.9 to 171.2. And opposing third down percentage, 46.7 to 29.1. We've been talking about it all season. If the Ravens passing defense could figure it out, the pass offense was historic. The rush offense was historic. The run defense was great. If they could find just that final infinity stone, place it on that gauntlet, this team had the potential to go toe-to-toe or head-to-head with anybody. And so John Harbaugh was asked, this was after the Ravens beat on the Houston Texans and beat down the Houston Texans. He was asked, the question was early in the season, people were slinging arrows at Zach Orr, criticizing the defense. He was asked, how pleased are you with how that group has turned it around this season? And he said, quote, I'm very pleased. The guys went to work and we knew that it was all correctable, but you have to get to work. You have to do it. I've said numerous times, it's a week-to-week league and it's important to keep things in perspective. It's a good lesson for everything else besides football to keep things in perspective. You can improve. You can get better. I'm proud of those guys. Zach obviously spearheading it and DMP's helping us, of course. Let's look at all the players and all the coaches. What a great job they've done. But you know what? We're just getting started. We've said, all right, it's the January season now. The December season is behind us. It's January season now. We also talked about the significance of the turnaround and the questions that were being faced there. And now that the defense is ascending, Harbaugh said, I can't say that it's surprising. We're not surprised by it. We knew and believed that we're going to start playing better. We knew we were going to play a lot better. I said it. The good news is that we can play so much better and we were good enough to do it. We were healthy. We had our players. We did have more to move some pieces around and guys just kept working, said that was good. And they kept working on fundamentals, trying to get better. We appreciate that. We'll be thinking about the next game, trying to play defense the next game. Great defense, the next game there. So this was definitely an almost like I told you so moment for John Harbaugh, as I mentioned. He was kind of saying this all year. He believed in the guys. He believed in Zach Orr. They certainly did have to move some pieces around here. But we all have to put some respect on Zach Orr's name, right? I mean, we have to. The questions that he was facing at the beginning of the season were legitimate. It was legitimate. The defense struggled. And, I never came on here and said, okay, yeah, Zach Orr's done. I came on here and said, Zach Orr needs to improve because the room for error, the margin for error, that was running out. And some of the stuff that we were seeing, whether it was players being out of position, communication issues, some weird play calls going on, all that stuff was real. I'm not trying to say that, those conversations that we had or that were being had about the defense weren't legitimate, because they were. But you can almost compare it to Mark Andrews or maybe even Justin Tucker, if you want to do that. I know there are still some, lingering questions about Tucker and if he's fully back. I think we're definitely getting back to old Justin Tucker, but we'll have to see there. My point is that you have to give guys runway. And let's go back to Mike Macdonald. I know it's not the exact same situation, but it's pretty similar in a way, where we know Macdonald struggled over his first couple games as Ravens defensive coordinator. Obviously, there's a little difference between Macdonald and Zach Orr in the fact that Mike Macdonald, he went to Michigan. He had that year of experience under Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, where Zach Orr had never called plays at any level before. And that was always going to be a jump. And we knew that. I was on here for months after that hire with Zach Orr. If you're an everydayer, you know this. You listen to me say it, where it's like, yeah, there's always going to be, especially with younger coordinators, guys who haven't been in that position fully before. It's going to take some time. Now, it took a little longer than I thought it would. And that, to me, I know there was a lot of worry for people when I was saying, look, it has to get better. But I was never on here saying the guy has to go or demote him or whatever it was. I get those frustrations. They were certainly real. I felt those frustrations as well. I totally understand. But now we have a defense that, even if you want to talk about the personnel changes they did make with Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson, Trenton Simpson, which was even more recent, the Ravens have made those decisions, and it has benefited. Ardarius Washington has been one of Baltimore's best players on defense over the course of the last month and a half. You got a linebacker by committee with Malik Harrison and Chris Board. Those guys have played really well. And obviously the big one is moving Kyle Hamilton into a different role, moving him back to the back end. And that has simplified things. You have the closed door, open forum meeting. All that has turned into this incredible defensive turnaround, where it was never the run defense like we talked about. That has always been a really big part of Baltimore's success this season. Teams have had an extremely hard time running the ball against what is the top-rated run defense in terms of net yards per attempt. But it was always about the pass defense. And Ardarius Washington, even after the game against Houston, talked about it, where he said how much it means to play this well for Zach Orr. And Ardarius said, Zach Orr, put so much sacrifice in us, and we go out there, sacrifice for him. It means a lot for us, for sure. These guys love Zach Orr. I mean, Zach's a former player. He's someone that obviously has a pulse on the intensity. He's an intense guy, man. But look, we saw he laid his body out there on the line after that Ardarius Washington big play on Joe Mixon, where he was flying himself and running into Ardarius. He has that passion to him. He has that energy. And the fact that he was a former All-Pro, that his career was, taken from him at such a young age after he showed so much potential with that injury that he suffered. That's all stuff that these players can relate to. Not that they couldn't relate to a guy like Mike Macdonald. They absolutely did. These guys loved Mike Macdonald. But I think what Baltimore saw in Zach Orr was the potential. And how do you get to that potential? You have to go through some growing pains. So Baltimore clearly had a vision. I think it might have taken a little longer to get to the full realization of that vision. And sure, there are still things the defense has to clean up. Middle of the field, sometimes there are some penalty issues, which, of course, that can be blamed on both the coaching staff and the players. I don't want to put that on one or the other. But compared to what we have seen, particularly with this past defense, guys like Marlon Humphrey stepping up, having an incredible year. And he's talked so much about the turnaround in this defense. And I've been super impressed myself with Marlon in the leadership role that he has taken on this season. This, to me, Marlon's best season on the field, but off of it, he has ascended to a new role, and he has taken that role and embraced it. And I think that for Marlon, that has helped him. I think the on-field success has helped off the field. I think the off-field role has helped his on-field success. I love to see what Marlon's done this season. He talked about tough conversations that had to be had. And I think everybody was talking about early in the year, oh, well, Baltimore's defense, it's going to be the reason that they either win or lose games. And, we can talk about a lot of things that can win or lose this team games. But if they couldn't figure it out pass defense-wise, the offenses in the AFC are too good to have the pass defense Baltimore had at the beginning of the year, whether it be Kansas City or Buffalo, Cincinnati, who beat Denver and is almost on the cusp of making the playoffs, right? Those passing offenses, even if you want to talk about some of the NFC teams Baltimore could potentially see in the Super Bowl, the turnaround's been incredible for Zach Orr. John Harbaugh, he took his I told you so moment. I mean, you know what? He deserved it. And Zach Orr deserves all the praise coming his way because there was a lot of harsh criticism going around early at the beginning of the year. Criticism definitely, Zach Orr deserved criticism, but now he deserves all the praise, right? Criticism where criticism is due, praise where praise is due. That is my mantra here on Locked On Ravens. We criticized when it was due. Now we want to do that 180, and I'm very glad we can, and we can praise Zach Orr exponentially for what he has done with this defense and the players too. I don't want it to get lost that the players also have done a much better job executing, communicating. This has been a whole turnaround, and it has Baltimore where we were kind of wondering how far can they make it with this version of the defense. Might not be 2023 historic level, but it is right back to where it needs to be for this team to hopefully make a deep playoff run. And coming up in the second part of the show, there are some new narratives about Lamar Jackson and the Ravens for their playoff run that is upcoming. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll talk about that and more up next on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. I love going to live events during the holidays, and I'm always looking forward to making new memories during the holiday season. And Gametime is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And so the Ravens and Browns game in Week 18, AFC North for the Ravens. They win the North. Be sure to go on Gametime and find tickets for that. They have super deals and other tiers of deals, and the app has so many great features like Gametime Picks, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Down the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. We're back for our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you still on this Sunday, stress-free Sunday for Baltimore. No game for the Ravens this Sunday because guess what? They played on Wednesday. They played on Christmas, and they got the job done against Houston 31-2. Appreciate everybody again for being here today with us on Locked On Ravens. We, of course, are a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast, and we have you covered with news, analysis, updates. We have hit a ton of milestones recently, 10,000 subscribers in video form. We've had a couple of amazing episodes that have gone over 20,000, 30,000. I mean, we're doing great things over on Locked On Ravens. And if you want daily Ravens coverage, or if someone you know wants daily Ravens coverage, be sure to keep it locked in here on Locked On Ravens and send those people our way over here on the show. Let's talk about some new narratives forming around Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Everybody's favorite conversation is the MVP conversation. And look, it is definitely exhausting. It is tiring. It has definitely gotten toxic. Seems like it is down to the final two between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Although, hey, I will say, after the Bengals and Broncos game, I think a lot of people are starting to push that Joe Burrow agenda. And my opinion on that is there's been a lot of conversation about Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and the wins, the losses, seeding, with Buffalo being 2, Baltimore being 3. Joe Burrow's had a heck of a season. He's a heck of a quarterback, as are all three of these guys. But I don't think you can give the MVP to the 7 seed. I don't think he can do it. If Cincinnati even makes the playoffs, they still need to win. They need to do some stuff to get into the postseason still. They're not in it yet. So we'll see what happens. But I feel like with the MVP, it's gotten to the conversation point where obviously stats play a part in everything. And if you're keeping track at home, Lamar Jackson does beat Josh Allen in every single statistical category but rushing touchdowns. But the new thing has been recently, and we've kind of touched on it here on the show, but I haven't dedicated like a ton of time to talking about it, is Lamar Jackson is being, I guess, criticized for having Derrick Henry on his team. And people are using the fact that Lamar Jackson has Derrick Henry on his team against him. And the new narrative now, at least one of them, is Derrick Henry makes Lamar Jackson so much better. The Ravens would be, an 8-win team with Derrick Henry, but, the Bills would be a 2-win team with Josh Allen, this, that, and the other. I don't know why we have to do that. Yes, Derrick Henry's an incredible player. Yes, Derrick Henry benefits from playing with Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson benefits from playing with Derrick Henry. I don't think that anybody is disputing those facts. At least I know I'm not disputing those facts. But it just feels like the conversation around the Bills and the Ravens is even just like, oh, look, the Bills weren't expected to have the year that they had. They traded away Stephon Diggs. They lost a lot of vet defensive talent. All that is true, 100% true. But it's coming off, at least the conversation is coming off, as if Josh Allen has no talent around him whatsoever. And, man, if I'm James Cook, I'm just thinking, man, I'm doing stuff like, hey, look at me, Khalil Shakir, really good wide receiver for Buffalo. Is he a Zay Flowers? I don't think so personally. I think Zay's better than Khalil Shakir. The Ravens, does Lamar have better talent around him than Josh Allen does? I would say yeah. I would say yeah. I'm not going to sit here and tell you otherwise. The Amari Cooper deal, like they get him, hasn't necessarily worked out, I feel like, the way everybody expected it to, but like you still have guys like Dalton Kincaid. The offensive line is good in Buffalo. Like, you have players on that team. Sure, Lamar Jackson's talent is better, but it just feels like the discrepancy is being talked about as if Lamar has an all-time, like Lamar's throwing a Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, and he has Travis Kelce and the Mark Andrews duo at tight end with Derrick Henry in the backfield and the best offensive line in the world. The narrative is Josh Allen is throwing to nobodies and guys who shouldn't even be in the league. And I think both ways it's a little bit extreme, where I think we can kind of bring that conversation back to like, yes, Lamar has better talent around him, but I don't think the disparity is so much between those that like we have to discount the fact that Josh Allen has good dudes on his team and punish Lamar for having a good piece of, talent around him in Zay Flowers or Derrick Henry, or having pieces around him that can help him succeed, because Josh Allen also has guys on his team that can help him succeed. But the other conversation that's beginning to creep up, and this is more generally Ravens related, but it obviously does all come back to Lamar at the end of the day, is the fact that people are now talking about Super Bowl for the Ravens and for Lamar Jackson. The conversation around Lamar in the Super Bowl is, if he wins all these MVPs and has all this success, it doesn't matter if he doesn't win a Super Bowl. I agree with that. I think Lamar does have to win at least one, if not multiple Super Bowls here, because we are now in these conversations. It's fun to me. We talked about this with Sam and Njoku on Friday. It is fun to me to be in these conversations and have a player as polarizing, as talented, as incredible as Lamar Jackson on your team, to be able to talk about like this and say, where is he in even all-time conversations? Because a third MVP, breaking Michael Vick's all-time career rushing record for quarterback, everything that he's done, he already has multiple MVPs. That stuff puts you in a conversation like that. Now, a third MVP in a Super Bowl, man, that would get you in a top 10 conversations, maybe top 5 conversations, and Lamar has not hit 30 years old yet. That's the most impressive part of this conversation. Now, the narrative around the Ravens is the fact that, yeah, they've been a great regular season team. They've been awesome in the regular season. We talked about this yesterday. That doesn't matter. What matters is your playoff success and your Super Bowl success. The example I've used over the last couple of months, and honestly, if you're an everyday, you've listened to me for years, I've talked about this. Now, it applied to last season, but it applies to other years as well, is that 2023 season was fun. It was really fun. The Ravens were blowing teams out by 30, seemed like every other week, and they were so dominant in the regular season. They were the best regular season team. We don't talk about that season in Baltimore. Why is that? Because of how disappointing the playoffs were. Because of how disappointing it was that the Ravens couldn't get the job done with the team they had, the coaching staff they had. That was the disappointing part. The Ravens have been a little more up and down this regular season. They've had stretches of awesome football. They've had stretches of moments where you question how good they really are. They faced more adversity this season, and as I've said, I think that positions them better for a playoff run this year as opposed to last season, because when the Ravens faced adversity against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game, they folded in multiple ways. But I think if they face adversity in the playoffs this year, they're better equipped to handle it. So yeah, I think that the narratives around Lamar in terms of Super Bowl success and for Baltimore's Super Bowl success, that's real. But I also don't want it to fully diminish what Lamar has done in his particular case, right? Let's just say, and hopefully this does not happen. Hopefully we're talking about multi-time Super Bowl winner Lamar Jackson. Let's go to a world, a very dark, scary world, where Lamar Jackson does not win a Super Bowl. I don't want him not winning a Super Bowl to overshadow all the greatness he has had over the course of his career. Will it be a factor in conversations? Absolutely. Sure. But I also want others to be held to that standard as well. Because we can also go to a world where Joe Burrow never wins a Super Bowl, where Josh Allen never wins a Super Bowl, where some of these other great quarterbacks never win Super Bowls. And the way that people talk about Lamar, as I've said this for years, Lamar Jackson's mistakes are magnified, and sometimes his successes can be dusted and swept under the rug. So Lamar has had an incredible career. Nothing will take that away from him. But I guess how he ascends, where he is in conversations, depending on how important you feel like that is, it's a Super Bowl. And not everybody wins a Super Bowl. Look, not everybody's Tom Brady. Not everybody's Patrick Mahomes, right? Not everybody can do that as consistently as those guys can and have as early success as those guys did. That's just not how it goes for everybody. But it doesn't matter when you win it. You can be 23. You can be 35. A Super Bowl is a Super Bowl. And Lamar Jackson's a talented player that hopefully can lead his team there. We're going to have to see how the rest of his career unfolds. And for the Ravens, who have not been back to the Super Bowl since they won in 2012, 2013, and have only been to one AFC Championship game since then, that also, the regular season success needs to translate into postseason success. But coming up with the final part of the show, where does that postseason begin for the Ravens? There is an updated look on the playoff picture, stuff we've been talking about for a while, but that playoff picture beginning to come more clearly into focus. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, and so much more. They have the Great American Story and so many other courses you can get in on. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. We're back. Final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you on this Sunday edition bonus episode of the show. 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast, Monday through Friday. Our regularly scheduled programming comes out at 6 a.m. Eastern time every single weekday. I've done 1,410 consecutive episodes of Locked On Ravens during the week. And obviously we do bonus content like bonus episodes, live shows after every Ravens game, and a lot more. And obviously, look, I'm really excited for the playoffs here. I think this could be big for the Ravens. And obviously on this show, we will have you covered every step of the way. But where does the postseason begin for Baltimore? I've talked about it a lot, and we're going to talk about it a lot more, especially over the coming days, because we're going to know a lot more after Sunday, after today's action, of just where the Ravens end up going with everything, because the Ravens have a couple of different ways that this can go. And after every game, that picture becomes a lot clearer when it just comes to who the Ravens could be playing on Wild Card Weekend. So I'll just run through these, and then we're going to talk about it a little more tomorrow, because it might be even more clear who they play based off of a couple scenarios that happen today. So let's start off with the scenario of if the Ravens get the 3 seed, they beat the Browns, and they win the AFC North. Let's start there. There are 4 ways that it could go for Baltimore. 2 teams if this happens. The first scenario is if the Steelers win and the Chargers win, that means the Ravens face the Chargers as the 6th seed. If the Steelers win and the Chargers lose, the Ravens still face the Chargers. If the Steelers lose and the Chargers lose, you guessed it, still the Chargers. The one scenario where the Ravens will play the Steelers in this case, if the Ravens get the 3 seed, is if the Steelers lose and the Chargers win. The reason for that is because The Steelers and the Chargers played earlier this season. The Steelers won that game, so they have the tiebreaker. The only way that the Chargers can leapfrog the Steelers for that 5 spot is if they have a better record. They have to have one more win than the Steelers do. If they have the same record, the Steelers get the 5 seed, the Chargers will get the 6 seed. Now, I know there's a lot of conversation about which team people prefer the Ravens to play, and I'm curious if you're on YouTube with us, put in the comments who you prefer between the Chargers and the Steelers, or if you don't care, if you're just like, hey, bring on anybody. This Ravens team can go up against anybody. I think for me, the Chargers, even though they're playing really well right now, I just don't think they have the horses on the defensive line to keep up with Baltimore offensively. I know it'd be a little weird game, and I know there'd be the narrative between John and Jim Harbaugh, the Harbaugh again. But we know how weird those Pittsburgh games can get. And despite the fact that Pittsburgh just seems to be absolutely falling apart right now, seeing a team 3 times in a season can get very dicey very quickly. So I think the Chargers, if you're looking for, which team might match up, will the Ravens match up better with, I would probably go Chargers. But hey, you know what? You got to beat the best to be the best. And I think no Ravens player or a lot of people is shying away from that there. But there are a couple other scenarios we can talk about here. Another one being if the Ravens somehow get the 2 seed. Now, of course, this all gets squashed if the Bills win today against the Jets, which I do expect them to. If the Bills win, they will get the 2 seed. But if the Bills lose out and the Ravens beat the Browns, they will get the 2 seed because the Ravens have the tiebreaker over the Bills, so that would leapfrog them from 3 to 2. In that scenario, it just depends on what happens with the Broncos and the Bengals. I know there are a couple of other teams that could maybe still factor in, but I know a lot of Ravens fans are probably a little worried if that's the case against Cincinnati because of the way that the offense has looked. The Cincinnati offense has looked against Baltimore in those games. I think it's a different defensive team for the Ravens compared to who they were when they played Cincinnati in those two. But even still, Joe Burrow's having a heck of a season. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, that's a scary offense. Defensively, the Bengals are absolutely terrible. They're a terrible defensive team. In my opinion, they're the worst defense in the league. So I feel like the Ravens will be okay there. But the Ravens beat up on Denver early in the season. And I feel confident in that. But I don't think that that's a very likely scenario. I think Baltimore is going to be out of that contention by today. But who knows? Maybe we're talking tomorrow and the Jets beat the Bills and there still is a conversation about that. But we will see. The last scenario here for the Ravens, people either love this or hate this. I've come across some people who love it, some people who hate it. If the Ravens lose the North, there's still a shot the Ravens do not win their division. How that would happen is obviously the Ravens would have to lose to the Browns in Week 18, and the Steelers would have to beat the Bengals. If that's the case, the Steelers would leapfrog the Ravens back, and they would take the North while the Ravens would be the 5 seed, and they would be locked into that 5 seed regardless of what happens with the Chargers because the Ravens have the tiebreaker over the Chargers in that scenario, so they'd be over the Chargers in that rate. That would mean the Ravens would go back to Houston to play the Texans in the 4-5 game, which I feel more than confident. If you want the team, and I've been talking about this, if you're an everydayer, you know my stance on this. The Texans being the Ravens' first-round opponent, the Ravens show up to that game and win, in my opinion. Win by a lot. We saw it on Christmas Day. Texans are an injured team. CJ Stroud has regressed. I feel like the Ravens win that matchup pretty handily. But the most likely scenario out of all this, probably, and based off what I've just read out here and talked about, is the Ravens will be the 3 seed and they will face the Chargers. That seems to be the most likely scenario, but that doesn't mean it's the only scenario. So, of course, we'll talk about it more tomorrow and just do an updated picture because a couple of those scenarios might be eliminated when we talk again tomorrow, which is kind of crazy how ever so changing this playoff picture is for the entire NFL. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On your way out, hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form as well. Same show, both audio and video, so you're not missing out on any content that we put out here on Locked On Ravens. Coming up, we'll be back here tomorrow with our regularly scheduled programming, so be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.